Welcome to The Brain Factor, hosted by myself, Joy Riddle, and Laura Hawley. We're a part of Meridian Behavioral Healthcare, where we believe that wellness is within everyone's reach. This podcast is a conversation about what research-based protective factors look like in real life. Our hope is that you'll walk away with something that you can use in your own life and have had some fun with us along the way. So let's get started. Thanks for joining us today on the Brain Factor podcast. This is the one about why we're here. So we started this podcast almost 2 years ago now. Laura, did you know that?
I did.
October
before we went out.
21. Yeah, we started in October 2021. And we started this podcast because Laura and I worked together at Meridian Behavioral Healthcare. And we used to sit in my office and sometimes we'd be working on a project or talking about something. We were always talking about resilience or evidence-based research or how to, continue on when things get tough, or how we can help people in our field, because we worked in mental health. And how we can help them with that. We had all these great things, and we thought about all the different ways that protective factors play out in real life. And we, one day, I don't know if it was you or me or both of us, but we were like, oh, we should
share this.
Yeah, we need to share this information with people because it would probably be helpful. So I'm going to turn this over to you right now because all of this is about the protective factors and resiliency and all of those things. And Laura is actually a master trainer in resiliency. So she can really lay out the science for you. I'm usually here along for the ride and for the real life experience because, I've had to be resilient all my life. All of us do.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I remember that time when this podcast was born.
Yeah.
Because one of the things we kind of kept hanging our hats on was this idea that so many people are out there, the concept of being resilient and the concept of there are things we can do in our life that offer a hedge of protection against developing any kind of issues, whether they're substance misuse or mental health challenges or just kind of get knocked down, right? That we're all just kind of trying to figure out what works. And there's actual science and research.
Yes, that was what's so exciting to me.
That we already know what works. Spoiler, right? But the general public does not always know what works, right? That's a real industry specific thing. And I remember feeling like, why are we gatekeeping this, right? Mm-hmm. Like, let's try to get this out as much as we can, because if we're focused on the things that we know are supported by research and evidence, our chances of success are much greater, right? Yeah. If we put our focus and our energy there, we're gonna get those outcomes that we're looking for. And then we had so many conversations about how do these things show up in our real life, right?
How does it look like? Because sometimes they're messy. They're good things, but they're really, really messy.
Yes. So I love that you use the word messy, because one of the number one myth busting statements about being a resilient person is that resiliency is messy, right? I love so much, when I teach classes on resiliency, there's a meme that I share, and it's in my PowerPoint, it's in my slide deck. And it says, so are you gonna cry about it, or are you gonna boss up? And the answer is, first of all, I'm gonna do both. Yeah. Yes. And I love that, because that's resiliency, right? Yeah. It can be messy. One of the most resilient people I have ever met in my entire life is this woman, Kristen. Hi, Kristen. We knew each other. Her husband is a service member. We knew each other when I worked for the Department of Defense. And I remember when he deployed, and I was out there with her when they left, and we stood on the tarmac, and the plane took off and she fell apart.
Yeah.
And then got back up and bossed up about it, right? And became inspirational to so many other families who were going through deployment, and knew all the right things to say and do. And even in that moment, she took care of herself. She took care of their child. She was just the pillar of everything that resiliency stands for. And I'm pretty sure she cried for 12 straight months. It never felt good.
You're resilient, or you're able to pick yourself back up, doesn't mean you don't have the struggle.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean I don't know who might do this, but if they want to cry, they might lock themselves in a closet.
I can't imagine. Who does that?
I don't even know. I don't
does
know
that,
who
Julie?
does that. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Spitballing here.
Somebody
Maybe.
might do stupid things like that. But it doesn't mean you're not struggling,
Right.
and it's not
Right.
ugly, and it's not messy, because all of it is.
Yes, it really is. It really is. And it's not about like not showing emotion or not giving into those things. It's about sort of knowing when and where and how to navigate through those emotions so that we can get to the other side, to a productive place that's protective and emotionally healthy.
Yeah, and I've even gotten better about it myself since we started doing this.
Yeah, so much
Yeah.
intentionality when we have to talk about it all the time, right?
Yeah. So I've applied a lot of the strategies that we talk about and share with you in my own life. And I actually don't really cry in my closet anymore.
Oh, that's good.
It might be outside of the closet.
You're like, I own my crying.
So
now.
I do it, and I called you today
Yes.
on the way in here because I've been having a particularly challenging couple of weeks. Just all good things.
Yeah.
They were all good things. There was just so much, and I couldn't figure out how I was going to make it through today to get here
Yes.
and record this podcast, because there were all these great things going on in my life at work and, personally and everything else, but they were crushing me.
Things that needed your attention, and there's
Yeah.
only so much joy to go around.
Joy. Yeah. So I've been like, this whole week leading up to this, I've been like, okay, well, I've got these two personal things that I really want to do. So I went out and I had appetizers with a really, good friend. We had a little girls' night last night.
Nice.
That helped me build up a little bit. But I found out this morning when I got up, I was still like a fragile piece of glass or something, because I misplaced my phone and almost went into tears.
Oh.
I woke my husband up. Well, he was waking up. He opened his eyes and I'm like, I can't find my can't find my phone, and I'm gonna cry. And I don't know where it is, and I just had it. And he's like, well, where have you been? I'm like, everywhere. I've been in the TV room, the bedroom, the bathroom. I was in the garage. I had to get clothes out of the closet.
It might be in the dishwasher. I don't know.
I have no idea, but I can't find this. Can you? So he was so nice, and he called my phone for me, but the ringer was off, so it didn't end there. But I did recover it, and I'd be like, okay, I'm going. I got my car, and I started driving, and I called you, and I'm like, I'm phoning a friend, which is a strategy for my resilience. I said, but I had to shift my attitude. I think I said, you picked it up, and I said, I'm at the end of my rope.
Yes.
And you're like, going on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello.
But here I am. I'm happy and I'm smiling.
Yes.
And we're here and we're doing this.
Yeah.
It was really ugly and messy getting here.
Absolutely.
But
That is such great examples. Thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable this morning, because it's really helpful to know that those are resilient strategies, right? So what you're describing is one of the 6 pillars of resiliency, of what the science and the research and the evidence supports go into making a person resilient, right?
Yeah.
And that's connection. So connection to other people, right? That's a huge piece of resiliency, and building those connections, and the fact that you prioritized going out last night, right? And that was important to you. That
Yeah, I
helps
almost
you be
canceled
resilient.
it because it was something I could get off my plate. But I'm like, no.
Right. You asked your husband for help this morning. You called me, right? Those are all resilient strategies. That's another kind of common myth about resilient people, is like they got it all taken care of and they don't need help, right?
Yeah.
Getting help is a resilient strategy. That's an important piece of it, right? So I love all of that, because that is one of those 6 pillars. So I want to back it up just for sake of foundational.
Yes, please do.
So what is resiliency, right? So maybe that's a term we've heard, but we don't know exactly quite how to define it. And it's very simply put, is the ability to bounce back from adversity, right? It's not what happens to you, it's what you do with it. And that's really where resiliency lies. And it was about 10 years ago that I was first introduced to resiliency as a science. And prior to that, I mean, I was familiar with resiliency, but I always just,
It was like pulling up your bootstraps.
Right.
That's what you always
sort of a
heard.
suck
like,
it
get
up.
your suck it up.
Right.
Yeah.
Walk it
Put on
off.
your big girl pants.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Rub some dirt on it.
Yeah,
Get out.
but I also had this misconception that people were either resilient or not. Right? That it wasn't this learnable, teachable skill, right? Because we've all known those people where like they can handle just like everything, right? They're like a duck, all the water just rolls off their back. And then those people were like a broken nail in a car accident. It's both a 10. It's all at the same level. Everything, the sky is always falling, right? And I just kind of thought that was prior to really like learning this material and becoming a master resilience trainer. I just kind of thought you had it or you did it, right? And it was so mind-blowing to me to learn that with the right practice, tools, exercise, and intentionality and focus and learning, that anyone could be a high level of resilient. Anybody can be resilient. But you have to know what to work on, right? And that's part of what like I'm super passionate about sharing is what to work on. And so the 6 pillars we talked about, one already is connection. The others are optimism, but we've talked so much about that. That's not your mama's optimism.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's not. None of this toxic positivity stuff, right? But so optimism, which is really just having hope, right? That's one of the pillars. Self-awareness and self-regulation are 2 others. And that's not the same thing as self-control, right? Sometimes it's packaged together and sold to us as self-control, but it's not, because it's not about suppressing or controlling it's about navigating through it, right? Having the awareness, that's one of the pillars. And then having the ability to regulate that's another one of the pillars. And then the other 2 are this exploration of character strengths, sort of knowing where you shine, what you bring to the table, and how to apply that. And then the mental agility, which is that ability to take in new information and sort of pivot our way of thinking or our behavior or whatever, how we're perceiving things, and be able to change course. So those are the 6 pillars. And then there's so many things that live under those, right? That if we beef those up and we work on those, that's what the science and the research tells us goes into a person being resilient.
Yeah.
Right. I'm so passionate about that.
I know, and I am too. I just don't, I don't have the masters in resilience training like you do. But one of the things I do know, and I can say, is over these past 2 years that we've been doing this podcast, we've unpacked a lot of those.
So many.
Yeah. So we're kind of doing a rewind right now for us and like going back to, the beginning and sharing again why we're doing all of this. But I also want you to know that like, if you go back, if you started listening, you haven't been listening for 2 years. If you go back, you can look through them and you can find episodes on so many of these that we've already unpacked.
And there's more than one topic that goes under them, right? So like let me think of so under the self-awareness and maybe even under the self-regulation piece is all of that like stress management, energy management, right? But then there's that even drills down further. It's like not all stress is created equal. And we've talked about this before. There's like overwhelm. There's good stress. Like you have good stress overwhelm right now.
Yeah.
You're involved in so many projects. There's so many exciting, good things going on. Even like anybody that knows you personally knows your robust travel schedule and how meaningful that is in your life and all the things you get to do, right? But then there's things that are piling up at home when you're doing that, right? And then your family is very important to you and you're going to go see them and you do all these things and then the work is piling up, right? So it's all like good stuff. But there's this overwhelm and this good stress, right? Periods of great change in our life. That's a different type of stress. So that's a different tool, right? Stress, nervousness because something we value is at stake. That's a different kind of stress that requires a different tool, right? Yeah. So there's so much work to be done and that's just one piece of the self-awareness and self-regulation conversation. And the reason those conversations are separate is because awareness is about what stresses me out? How do I respond? What are those triggers for me? What are the things that make me feel a certain way or do a certain thing? Or how does my thought process work, right? And then the regulation is now what do I do about it? If I'm not getting the results that I want because these are the things that overwhelm me or this is the way I respond in these situations, then how do I regulate that to get better outcomes, right? So that's why there are two separate conversations. But for me, those conversations have always been just so firmly intertwined.
Yeah. So now we've always, or at least I have on this podcast, I've always looked at this in a very broad sense, which is what I try to bring to the table. And you're always keeping us focused on the science and the evidence. And like you were just telling me a little while ago, which I thought was pretty cool, those things are kind of coming together now. So our approach to this is showing up in science now.
Yes. So I work in prevention, right? And primarily with substance misuse prevention, with a little overlap on mental health disorder and challenges prevention and just all of those things underneath that big umbrella. And so one of the things I'm certified to train in is this SAPS certification, which is Substance Abuse Prevention Strategy Skills Training, right? I probably butchered that, but all the letters are in there.
Well, I want to just stop you for 1 second and say that it's September and it's National Recovery Month.
Right.
So this is really timely to be talking about right now.
Because
too.
resiliency fits into that whole greater conversation as well. But so in that, one of the things I recently saw is that, when you and I first got together to do this podcast and we looked at the research that came out of the SAPS curriculum, that's where we started. And we said, okay, here's one of the science and evidence-based lists of resiliency, not of resiliency, of protective factors and risk factors. And we said, oh my gosh, so much of this is what's also included in resilience. Like there was coping skills and problem solving and emotional management and all that. There was other things too that don't necessarily fall under the umbrella of resiliency, right? There was and we've talked about these things, the financial health piece and the nutrition and all of that, right? That's just that broader protective piece. But we were like, gosh, this huge majority of them are resilient strategies. Well, now they've done an update. SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, has put out an updated curriculum for SAPS. And in there is an updated science and evidence-based list of protective factors, and resiliency is listed.
Score for the factor.
We called that 2 years ago. So there's two things I love about that. So the first is we were right.
Yeah.
So I love that. Of course, that's my number one. But the other thing that I really love about that is it shows so clearly that the research is ever evolving on this, right? So even though I'm a stickler for, well, the science doesn't say it, the science doesn't say it, and you're like, I'm sorry, but this is logical, it makes sense, right? There's such a marriage of those two things because sometimes it's not that it's incorrect, it's just that the science and the evidence isn't there yet, right? And I'm a stickler because I feel like if we're going to put our resources and our energy somewhere, we want something that's sort of proven effective. But that was a great example of how we knew that 2 years ago, right. And now we have the science-based stuff behind it. We're yes, okay. So we can we're more valid. We have a lot more credibility now. So
just saying.
So I love that. But yeah, so that's part of one of the reasons why a refresh is good, right? The other thing was, you mentioned Recovery Month, and one of the things I want to point out is that resiliency in particular. I think sort of all of the risk and protective factors remain relevant, but we tend to look at resiliency through the lens of prevention, right? If I'm resilient, I will be, by its very nature of the word, I'm resilient to developing these issues, right? And while that's true, sometimes we do end up with a mental health disorder or challenge or a substance misuse disorder, or we get knocked down by life, right? Or something happens that maybe resiliency didn't show up for us in those moments. And now we have to recover, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we are in recovery, but whether it's in clinical recovery or substance misuse recovery or just recovering from anything, right? Resiliency still plays a huge factor in sort of helping us get our life back, right? And helping us get back to where we need to be. That's that bouncing back piece. And that can occur at any place you are in life, right? Whether it's preventative or anywhere under that continuum, right up to recovery and maintenance, right? I think it shows up in all those places.
Yeah. And it is really interesting how it does, being at Meridian and being at Meridian for a long time, And especially after we started talking about these, I started seeing these things applying in people's lives when they were in their scope of recovery and different areas. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as they were growing and, moving on, I would see these things in them now that they didn't. Like maybe their relationship was better with someone, or just you could pick almost any one of those and apply it. Yeah, you're eating better now,
Right.
Or I was like, wow, this is like mind blowing.
I love that you're saying that, because I think for me, that's the one of I have the great privilege in the position I'm in now, that I intersect with a lot of folks in recovery, to include folks who are like certified peer specialists and who are in part of recovery community organizations and things. And there is something very special about somebody in recovery because of everything that they have gone through to rebuild. Those are skills that absolutely just show up in other aspects of their life, right? It just shows up everywhere. And they just have this nailed, this resiliency and peace, and the relationship piece and all of that is just, it's very cool. It's very cool to see just how it's such a complete part of them as an individual. And I enjoy that. I enjoy that and I admire that about my friends who are in recovery, that I have had the privilege of getting to know. I really do admire that. I think that's cool. So I think, resiliency, and one of the parting thoughts I will offer is that it's like any other muscle. It's like any other thing we want to get good at. We have to practice. We have to do things with intent. We have to apply things, right? And we have to revisit it. And one of the ways you can do that is by joining us every month, and tuning into the Brain Factor, because even if we don't come out and say it, if we fail to connect the dots, those are the dots that we are working with, folks. We are working within risk and protective factors, within resilient strategies, and that is everything that we talk about here. So thank you.
Evidence-based,
All research-based. Even when she wants to go off on a tangent, I rein her back in.
Yep, she does.
But as always, thank you for having joined us thus far. We hope you continue to do so, and we will see you next time. Thanks for listening to The Brain Factor. Joy and I are so thrilled to be having these needed conversations. We'd love to hear your feedback on this episode, so if you could drop a comment or leave a review with your thoughts or any requests that you may have, it would be appreciated. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Living a healthier and happier life starts with one step, and we're excited to be on this journey with you. Until next time.